Welcome back to the show. That's what he said. So today I'm going to be actually telling one of my own dating stories, and it's a good one. Well, good or bad, depending on how you perceive things. This is a story about the one and only time that I have been ghosted. I want to preface by saying these story time segments are something that I wanted to do because I really want to be vulnerable with you guys. I want to share my experiences because I know that it will help you guys relate and kind of help us all connect and bring all of us together and find common ground. I'm sure that there will be some of you that relate to my story. And I think by vocalizing and talking about our experiences in the dating world in a vulnerable way will help us sort of get to the root of what the hell is going on in our dating culture. Why is it so hard to find someone to be in a relationship with, to get married to settle down with? But the story time segments are not the purpose is not to put people on blast or just to throw shade, but shade will be thrown. Don't get it twisted. Let me take a sip before we start. This is just water, but still. We're going to start all the way back at the beginning. It all started in high school. I was a freshman, and at my school they had something called fish camp. And fish camp was where all the freshmen go to the high school like a week before school, and there's a few days where you spend time with the other freshmen and y'all do activities, you tour the school, you get your schedule, and at the end of fish camp they have a dance. So, it's a typical high school dance in the cafeteria, whatever. And I actually danced with this guy. We're going to call him Ghost. I don't know how we ended up dancing together. I'm sure he asked me or something. I don't know. But we ended up dancing together, and I just remember like a ton of kids like swarming around us and like watching us dance. And this is back in 2008. So as y'all know, at the school dance, this was like not appropriate dancing for 14-year-olds. Like, we're grinding on each other, we're hot and sweaty. So, me being the little attention-seeking little party girl that I was, I'm pulling out all my best moves on this guy who, of course, he's grinding behind me. He's leaning back, I'm leaning forward. We're like full on getting it on the dance floor. Other students are like surrounding us, watching us, cheering us on. And we were actually dancing to a Chris Brown song. So it was also like super cute because it's kind of lovey-dovey. And if you ever went to like the club or anything like that back in the day like this, you know that sometimes you're dancing with somebody because he's behind you and you don't even know what he really looks like. And you have to kind of like look at your friend across from you and be like, yes, no, thumbs up, thumbs down. Like, should I, is this good, bad? Should I walk away? And so I didn't really get a great look at him. I kind of was glancing, but I was just like, whatever, this is fun. He's good at dancing. We're entertaining the people. We're giving them what they want. So I'm just going with it, but I will say I did feel like a spark. And I remember like after we were done dancing a song or two, I don't know, I like walked away and looked back at him and just remember him being like, like just deer in the headlights, essentially drooling, like he was feeling the chemistry too. And I was just like being my 14-year-old self, like, yeah, he's never going to forget that. And that was pretty much that. We didn't hang in the same circle in high school. We were in different activities, different friend groups. So we really never saw each other or like went to the same parties or anything like that. Senior year, we had one class together that was one semester long. I do remember like talking to him in that class and just thinking he was really funny. But I did have a love interest at that time, and it was my senior year. I was pretty much like checked out of school anyway. I was probably asleep half the time in that class. But anyway, fast forward to I guess like 28 years old, a couple years ago. He ended up following me on Instagram because our high school reunion was coming up. So a lot of people were like reconnecting online. He followed me on Instagram. I didn't think much of it. And then he starts sliding in my DMs. So he's like sending fire emojis here and there or commenting on certain things that I post or whatever. And I would just like not respond. To me, he was just a stranger, essentially. I mean, not someone that I was like looking to reconnect with. And so I would just kind of ignore it, like, okay, creeper in my DMs, loser. And then he started to like actually say things, and I would kind of respond. I would start to like see some of his stuff. I'm like, oh, he looks like he has fun and he's kind of funny, whatever. And he started to ask me to hang out. So in the beginning, the first few times that he asked me to hang out, I was just like, no, I was blowing him off. And he was very persistent. So finally, one time he was like, I really want to take you to dinner, whatever. So I was single at the time. So I was like, you know what? Why not? Let's just give it a shot. He seems kind of cute. He seems funny. Let me do it. So I agreed to go on the date. And I knew that he lived out of town. At the time, I actually thought he lived a few hours away. So the week is coming up that we scheduled our date, and he was supposed to be coming into town. Well, then he called me and was very apologetic, and he was saying that he wasn't going to be able to make it into town that weekend, so he wasn't going to be able to take me out, that he had a work thing come up. So I was like, okay, no big deal. I wasn't too worried about it. But we continued to talk on the phone that night, and the conversation was like really flowing. We were just kind of starting to break the ice, get to know each other. And we ended up talking on the phone that night for like a few hours. And when I hung up the phone, I was just very pleasantly surprised. I was like, wow, I didn't expect us to have so much in common and have like such good flow in the conversation. And then the next day he called me again, and we talked on the phone for like 4 hours. And then the next day for like 5 hours, and then 6 hours. And then I specifically remember that first Sunday, we were literally on the phone for, I want to say 10 to 12 hours, like all day. And needless to say, the connection was forming really quickly, and we were getting to know each other really fast. I definitely was into him. He was into me. And for the next month, we continued to talk on the phone and FaceTime basically 25/8. I mean, like, if we were not in the middle of a workout or in the middle of like a job at work, we were talking to each other. And if we weren't talking to each other, we were texting or sending memes on Instagram. I will say by the end of that month that we were talking all the time, I was like, this could definitely be the guy. Like, he checks all the boxes, and then he made new boxes and he checked those. And he made me laugh. We have all the same values. We saw the same things for each other in the future. The only thing was we hadn't hung out in person yet. So this is very like Love is Blind, because, we're connecting and all of that over the phone, but, we still have to hang out in person. So he finally makes plans to come into town, and he was going to stay for a week at his mom's house. And that was when we were going to go on our first date. So he comes into town, he comes to pick me up for the date, and I was literally so nervous. I was thinking of the worst case scenario. I was like, oh my God, he's going to have all these icks. I'm going to immediately, like, what if I'm not attracted to him? What if he's weird? What if he talks weird? What if he smells weird? What if he's short? Like, I was just running through every possible scenario to be like, oh my gosh, this is just not going to work. What am I going to do? I'm going to be so upset. because I really like him, but what if there's no spark? Okay, so he gets to my house to pick me up, and we're both a little nervous at first. But after a few minutes go by, I made him take a shot with me to just calm both of our nerves. And all of those doubts and worries went out the window. And it felt natural. He brought me flowers. He was an absolute gentleman. Our date that day was amazing. I had my doubts about what his plans were or lack thereof, but he totally took control of the day and it was perfect. It was literally a perfect day. We kissed that day and that was perfect. Everything about that date was 10 out of 10. So all of my expectations were exceeded, and I was even more so like, wow, this could really, really be the guy. Now, we had discussed the fact that he lives out of town. My understanding was that that is a temporary situation for him. He took a job opportunity. That was a really great opportunity for him, but part of that opportunity was going to lead him back home, which is where he ultimately wants to be and wants to settle down and raise his family here, where his family is. And that's where I am. So I was like, perfect. I truly didn't mind the distance because it was allowing us to get to know each other from afar. So I felt like it was actually a really healthy boundary for me, at least, because I was able to look at things more objectively. Whereas, if I'm dating someone that I'm seeing all the time, you start to get those rose-colored lenses. I'll start to just become so infatuated, and it's, I'm falling in love, or I'm falling in lust, and it's hard to be objective or see things as they really are when you have all those feelings and those butterflies and you're constantly hanging out and having fun together. But getting to know each other from a distance helped me to see everything clearly. And I really felt like everything was perfect. There were no red flags. There was no glaring issue that I was overlooking, as I have many times in the past. We were on the same page with everything. The connection was there. Everything was 10 out of 10. So that week that he was in town, we hung out almost every single day that week after that first date. And things continued to just grow and blossom. And again, everything was absolutely 10 out of 10. And we were both very much so on the same page with that. So he went back to where he lives, and I kind of like threw an idea out there because of course I wanted to see him again. I wanted to make plans for when we were gonna meet up again. And there was a wedding coming up 2 weeks from the time that he had come into town. I had a +1 to the wedding, and he also knew the person that was getting married. So I was like, hey, I'm going to this person's wedding. If you want to come with me as my date, I would love that, but I totally understand if you don't want to. I know you just flew down. It would be another trip. And basically almost immediately he said yes. And next thing I know, he was booking the flight to come back. So he comes back a couple weeks later for the wedding. He had bought a suit for the wedding. We made plans that weekend. We went to a baseball game. He met some of my dearest friends at the baseball game. We also had a really nice date night, just the two of us. That was super romantic and wonderful. Or maybe that was the first time he came down. At some point we went on a really nice dinner date that was really romantic, but maybe that was the first trip. Doesn't matter. So we went to the baseball game. We went to the wedding. He met tons of my friends at that wedding. Everybody loved him, had a great time. Again, 10 out of 10. The next day, the day before he left, we just had a chill day at my house. He cooked for me, which was like an amazing steak dinner. I was so impressed. He totally took control at the grocery store, wanted to cook everything himself, and I was so genuinely so grateful. And I I really felt like anytime that I was with him, that I was able to be like a softer version of myself, and I was able to just relax and be feminine. And I never felt like I had to be in the driver's seat of that relationship. He was always in the driver's seat, as it should be, as the man. He truly was very masculine in the best sense, but he was also vulnerable. I could tell him anything. We shared all kinds of intimate details about our lives. Something that I don't want to leave out. So at the end of that weekend, he was like, I have this gift that I want to give you. Like, I brought you something. And I was like, okay, what is it? And he's like, it's not like a gift. Like, he was just being all weird about it. Like, he was nervous to show it to me. And I was like, just give it to me. Like, what is it? And he brought me this bottle cap that he said was really important to him. It's something that he keeps with him that gets him through hard times. And he received that bottle cap when he was going through a really, really hard time a few years ago or something. And he said he wanted to give it to me because he knew that this long distance thing was going to be challenging at times. And the bottle cap said something along the lines of, a good day's work may take several days, or something like that, meaning good things take time. So I thought it was really sweet. I really appreciated the gesture. I thought it was super encouraging, and it really showed me that, like, okay, he's serious about this. He's all in on this. And I kept the little bottle cap by my bed, and I was like, thank you, this is really special. And when he went back to where he lives, we had the conversation about, like, we're not seeing other people. He said he already hadn't been seeing or talking to anyone else while we were dating. And I told him that the couple of guys that I had seen at the very beginning, I had already chosen to shut that down. And so I was just like, with the level that we're at, I wouldn't be comfortable with us continuing to date other people. And he was like, yeah, absolutely, same here. So it was at that point of, we were committed to each other. We're essentially exclusive. He didn't ask me to be his girlfriend. He didn't say, will you be my girlfriend? But that was probably the next step. That was coming. And gosh, we were picking out couples Halloween costumes. We were talking about what kind of trips we're going to go on next year. So we were there. Over the course of all of this time, it was almost 3 months was the total time that we were dating or talking to each other. And he definitely treated me as though he saw a future with me. And we talked about those things. We both said that we saw each other as husband material, as wife material. We talked about, like, how we would raise our kids. What would our kids be like? Little joking things like, in our future dream house, or when we retire, this is what we're going to do. So we did a lot of dreaming together, which I would say he was probably the initiator of that majority of the time. But because he was initiating those conversations, I started to become more comfortable with it and more trusting. So I started to initiate conversations like that as well, because I truly meant it. I did see a future with him. So after that second trip, we were making plans for the near future. So there were holidays coming up that we were talking about plans for. Both of our birthdays were coming up. He was coming into town a few times because his brother was getting married. So we were planning out dates. I was getting ready to go visit him. That was sort of the next thing on the list. So I had that flight booked, and it was a normal week. It was a normal Friday. We spoke that morning. He had been pretty stressed that week about some work things. He was stressed about whether or not he was going to receive this bonus that he had been working really hard towards, that he seemed to be really relying on. And some circumstances happened at his job to where it was looking like he was probably not going to get that bonus. and he was really upset about it and just was really, really stressed. So that Friday morning, we spoke, he called me. We got into a little bit of a disagreement about those plans. So for the upcoming month, there was just a lot going on, and I had certain expectations that he had agreed to for my birthday plans, and he was trying to make his own birthday plans, plan for these other things he had going on, and we were just not agreeing on how and when. I'll just put it that way. Truly, in my opinion, it was nothing serious. It was just a little tiff. It was early. I was PMSing, so I was just like, in my head, I was like, we'll talk about this later. I definitely copped a little attitude during that conversation, but it was definitely not a big deal. But it happened. It's important to note. So the rest of the day went on, and I actually didn't hear from him that whole day, which was pretty out of the ordinary, but I also knew that he was really busy and stressed with all that work stuff. So around I would say 7 p.m., I was like, well, this is weird that I still haven't heard from him, because I assumed he was home from work. So I called him, didn't answer, and texted, "Are you okay?" No reply. Called again, no answer. So it's starting to get late. Now it's 8, 9 p.m. and I start getting anxiety. All of the what ifs start rolling through my head. Y'all know how it can be if you're a more anxiety prone person like myself. I start thinking the worst case scenario. I'm going through that conversation we had that morning. I'm like, oh my gosh, he's mad at me. He's going to break up with me. And then I'm thinking really bad stuff, like something's wrong. He got hurt. He got in a car accident. He works in construction. So I'm like, he got hurt on the job. Is he in the hospital? Literally going through every worst case scenario, because it was so extremely out of the ordinary that he hadn't called or texted that whole day. Because like I said, we were in communication basically 25/8. So it's getting later. I text a friend. I'm like, hey, what are you doing? I need to get out of the house. I'm just really having really bad anxiety. I need to go do something. So she's like, yeah, come out. So I go meet her out. I have a couple drinks with her, talk to her about the situation. And she agreed. She was like, yeah, that's really weird, but I wouldn't freak out until it's been 24 hours since y'all have spoken. She was like, then maybe you should probably start calling hospitals. I was like, okay, cool. So, of course, I didn't sleep that night. I was worried sick. And the next morning I had to go to work. So I went to work for a few hours. By the time I was done with work, it had been more than 24 hours since I had heard from him. I kept trying to call him. No answer. So my plan was I guess I'm gonna have to call somebody to do a wellness check on him, because I don't know any of his friends who are there in town with him. I don't know his mom's phone number or anything like that. So I'm like, well, what the heck else am I supposed to do? What if something's very wrong? So I don't think that I was psycho in any part of the situation. I think given the circumstances, I handled myself really well. The only thing I did that was a little bit crazy was during this time that I was freaking out and trying to figure out what to do, if I literally never heard from him, I was trying to figure out where he lives, because I didn't remember the name of the apartment complex. I just knew kind of the general vicinity of where it was, and I knew what it looked like because I had been on FaceTime with him and he gave me a whole tour of the apartment complex, because mind you, I had not been to visit yet. That flight was booked. That was upcoming. So I knew the general location and makeup of the apartment building. So I'm literally Googling to try to find this apartment in the city that he lives in, to try to find their phone number, because I'm like, okay, well, if it's more than 24 hours, I think I should call his apartment to check on him and tell them hey, I need you to do a wellness check on this person. And what I really didn't want to do was my plan B, which was if they said no or something, to call the police and have them do a wellness check. I don't even know how I would have done that because, again, I don't know his address. But yeah, let me tell you guys, I was spiraling at this point. That morning after it had been 24 hours, I was full spiral. Like, couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, could barely focus. I'm shaking, like full-blown panic attack, okay? So I was not thinking clearly in my own defense. I didn't do any of those things. They were just what I had planned. But I had 1 ounce of sanity left. So I thought, you know what? Let me call him one more time, okay? This is like hour 25, 26. And it was about 11 a.m. his time. So I call him and that answers. And he's like, hello, like clearly had been sleeping. And on the one hand, I was relieved that he was alive. And on the other hand, I was pissed that he was alive because he was not waking up in a hospital, because that means that you were just flat out ignoring me for the last 24 hours. So he was acting like nothing's wrong. I'm like, where have you been? What's going on? Why haven't you been answering? I've been worried sick. And he's just blowing it off. Well, I've been working, sleeping, like whatever. So I start yelling at him and I'm just like, what the why? I don't understand. You know, I thought you were in the hospital, blah, blah, blah. I'm kind of going off on him a little bit. And he was like just completely defensive. He's like, you need to calm down. I'm fine, blah, blah, blah. So I'm like, okay, you know what? I do need to calm down. At one point he was like, can I just have like a minute? Can I just get coffee or something? Can I have a minute? And I was like, a minute? You've had 24 hours, da, da, da. So I'm like losing my But anyway, he was like, you need to calm down. I was like, okay, I do. And so he's like, I'm gonna go get a cup of coffee and I'll call you back. And I was like, okay. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the last time that I ever heard his voice. Later that day, of course, he did not call me back. I'm continuing to have horrible anxiety that entire day because, again, I'm completely in the dark. I have no idea what's going on or why he's ignoring me. And I'm basically sitting by the phone waiting for him to call me back. He texts later in the day, maybe 4 or 5 p.m., and he says, I'm doing some retail therapy shopping. I just had this peak of stress, and I think I need it. I need some isolation. And I was like, okay, I want you to have your time and your space, but please call me when you're ready to talk because we need to talk about what happened. And he said, okay. He does not call me, obviously, ever again, but I never heard from him again. That was the last text that he sent me. By the next day, I just felt like it was really unfair that I had this feeling of like, I'm waiting by the phone for him. You know, I should be able to talk to you. I should be able to express how I feel. But at the same time, I didn't want to smother him and I didn't want to keep calling. And, you know, if he needed his space, then that's okay. He's got every right to need space. And he did, at least he expressed that in the text message. So I sent him a voice note that next morning, very calmly explaining my feelings about what had happened. And I was like, this has all gotten way out of hand, but this is what happened and this is how it made me feel. I care about you. I really want to talk to you. Just, you know, please call me. That was the gist of the voice note. Obviously, no response. And I would say another day after that was when I really started to like lose it mentally. I was not reaching out to him, I don't think, after that voice note. I might have tried calling one more time, but I could see by that point what was happening. I just hadn't accepted it yet because I was just like, this can't be real. He can't be ghosting me. He can't, like, I don't even think at that point the idea that he was ghosting me had even crossed my mind yet, because that seemed so outrageous and completely not the person that I thought I knew. I think I was more so in a state of mind like, I can't believe this is happening to me. Like, I thought this was perfect. I thought everything was going perfectly, and there was absolutely no explanation or indication that he was gonna end things. I was just so confused, and I felt so completely abandoned. And that was triggering some very, very extreme anxiety that I had not felt in a very, very long time. I literally, first of all, I got some anti-anxiety medication from a friend of mine, which, if you know me, you know that I don't do medication. Like, I don't even take ibuprofen unless I'm literally dying. Like, I don't do medicine. But it was absolutely necessary. I was like, I need to calm down my nervous system so that I can eat and sleep and figure out my next move. So that did help me. And my next move was I packed up my things and my dog, and I took off to Arkansas, to the town where I went to college, and stayed with one of my very best friends that I stay with to go visit a few times a year. And I drove there, packed up all my stuff, got in the car, and started driving. And it's about a 9-hour drive. I just needed that drive to somewhat clear my mind. I needed to get out of my house. I needed to be around the right people. And that's what I did. I was there for a few days. It absolutely helped me. But, I had to come back. While I was there, he did not reach out, obviously. I would say at that point, I was sending him a text message. I sent him a few text messages spread out over about a week and a half, 2 weeks. I was definitely not blowing him up, but I also wasn't giving up on the relationship. I truly felt as though he was going through something, and I felt like he was too valuable to me to just match his energy. And I don't have that in me to, if someone is hurting me, to just shut them off. Like, that's just not who I am. I was trying to show him for a period of, again, about a couple of weeks that I was still there and that I wanted to repair things. But the time came where I was like, I can't keep living in this emotional state, and I have to let this go. I have to accept what has happened. I have to accept the fact that he ghosted me, he abandoned me, and that I will probably never know why. That was extremely hard to process and to digest. Fortunately, I do have a wonderful therapist. I recommend therapy to all. And she was there for me through all of this. Something that she told me that really helped me was the why doesn't matter. He did what he did. He made his choice. He chose to do this. And we may never know why. In any relationship, each person brings in their stuff, their baggage. I brought in my stuff. He brought in his stuff. And his stuff took him away. And I had to, and still have to, work on not blaming myself, because let me tell you, for weeks, I was going through every single detail in my head obsessively. These were intrusive thoughts that would not stop. I was replaying everything I ever said to him, everything he ever said to me, looking for what did I miss or what did I do wrong, which are really both the same thing. I was trying to find a way to blame myself, because it being my fault for me personally is easier than not knowing why someone else did what they did. So if I could find a place to blame myself, if I could pinpoint, this is what I did wrong, which is why this happened, which is why he left me, then that would make me feel more in control of the situation. It would make me feel more in control of a situation that was completely out of my control, which is why it was inducing so much anxiety. But I didn't do that. Of course, there were things in the relationship that I could have improved on. Those last couple conversations could have handled myself a little bit better. But at the end of the day, something my therapist told me was there's nothing that you could have done to deserve this. She said, you could have done the worst thing in the world and you still wouldn't deserve this. Because what I did deserve is a conversation, is a chance, is closure, is an explanation. I do truly believe that this has to do with him and it doesn't have to do with me. However, I will say, in hindsight, there were very, very, very quiet whispers in my gut that told me something was off from the beginning. There was nothing glaring, there was nothing obvious, there was no big bright red flag or anything like that. But there was a still small whisper consistently throughout the relationship that was so quiet that I don't even think it was ever even a conscious thought, but it was there. So something that I do take away from this experience, well, I take away a lot of things, but one of those things is to really try and hone in on and listen to those still small whispers. It can be really hard because for me, it can be very confusing of what voices in my head are coming from my gut or coming from God, and what voices in my head are coming from my past and from my trauma. And those little voices that I was hearing while I was with him were very hard to decipher. And I thought that they were voices from my past that I was trying to ignore, or I was trying not to let those voices from my past dictate how I was going to go about the relationship. I was trying to go about it from a place of vulnerability and trust him and be open. Unfortunately, those voices were right. And I got very, very, very hurt. I was extremely heartbroken. I was heartbroken to have lost him because I was truly falling in love with him and he was becoming my best friend. Despite the fact that it was a short amount of time, there was a lot invested. It became a very rich relationship very fast. It was very condensed. And when it comes to falling in love, time is relative. I mean, I know people who got engaged and married within 6 months. And I know people that have taken 6 years. So I certainly don't put a time frame on falling in love with someone or finding your person. I just don't believe that you have to be with someone for a certain amount of time in order to truly love them or in order to truly see them as your future spouse. And those things had pretty much already taken place for me in that short amount of time. So all of that to say, it was extremely devastating and it was extremely heartbreaking. And it triggered these issues of abandonment that I didn't know I had. It brought up these wounds that I really wasn't aware of. So I do see that as a blessing that I had these wounds brought to my attention so that I can work on healing myself and being better for the next relationship or my future husband. But it being the first and only ghosting situation I have ever been through, I will say that that experience is absolutely awful. It's awful. And I think that ghosting someone is always the wrong thing to do. It's a form of vengeance. Withholding yourself, withholding closure and an explanation, and withholding those things from someone who cares about you is very unloving. It's just the wrong thing to do. But for some people, I guess it's the easier thing to do than to deal with the confrontation. The confrontation of either resolving conflict or breaking up with someone. I will never understand that personally. I have no issue with confrontation. I prefer it over sweeping things under the rug, but that's me, and not everyone's that way. Which is probably also why this situation was very, very hard for me to understand. But as the saying goes, they always come back. I have never had a guy not come back. I take that back. There's one guy, which I'll probably tell you guys about him in another story time eventually. But there's one guy who has never come back, and I don't put it past him. If he's single one day, he probably will. But Ghost, sure enough, came back. Sure as the sun rises every morning, he called me. So this would have been about 2 months after the last time that he spoke to me. It was actually the night before Thanksgiving. I'm sound asleep. My phone is on Do Not Disturb. I wake up Thanksgiving morning. I'm ready for a cup of coffee. I'm excited to watch the Macy's parade. I look at my phone and I see this text message from a phone number that I think is his. I don't have his phone number saved, but I immediately call my best friend who does have his number saved, which I gave to her for emergency purposes only. So I said, hello, this is the emergency situation. Please tell me if this is his phone number. So she confirmed it is in fact his phone number. The text message said, thinking of you. That's it. Actually, it was a misspelled version of thinking of you because he was obviously drunk. The text message came through at literally 3 a.m. and I was like, you've got to be kidding me. Then I thought, I need to check my missed calls. I checked the missed calls. What do you know? How many calls? Not 1, not 2, not 3, but 5 phone calls from him between the hours of 3 a.m. and 4 a.m. 2 FaceTimes, in fact, and 3 phone calls. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. Is this freaking real? Are you kidding? Is this a joke? Am I getting punked? My initial reaction was like, I'm just grossed out. That's just gross behavior to me. You're out getting drunk. First of all, the night before Thanksgiving, I'm sorry, you're 31 years old. Why are you out getting wasted the night before Thanksgiving? Like, be a normal adult, get some sleep so that you can wake up and binge out on food all day. Like, hello. I have not gone and gotten wasted the night before Thanksgiving since I was in college, probably. Like, grow up. I was like, this is giving unstable. This is giving emotionally unintelligent, and I just want nothing to do with it. At that point, I was feeling really good. I was in a good place. I had moved on. I was working on healing and getting back to being my normal self. It was Thanksgiving. My birthday was coming up. So I was just like, I really don't want anything to ruin my day or my vibe. I truly had no desire to respond or call, which actually surprised me. But I think it's just because of the way that he reached out. I had come to terms with the fact that he was either going to reach out at some point or I was never going to hear from him again. I was just like, God, whatever happens, happens. But I can honestly say I never thought that would happen. I never thought he was going to reach out like that. If anything, when I sort of fantasized about it, I thought he might show up at my doorstep for something dramatic, or he might just call or text for something not dramatic. But I truly never thought he was going to reach out drunk in the middle of the night. Also, thinking of you, really? Why don't you lead with, I'm sorry, I messed up. Can we talk? Hello, thinking of you? You think I give a shit that you're thinking about me? I don't. I know you're thinking about me because I'm great and we had a connection. So I'm sure you've been thinking about me for a while. I have no response to that. I literally have nothing to say to that. So yeah, when I contemplated a couple days later whether or not I should call him back or respond, I thought no, because I don't know if his reaching out was genuine or if he was just wasted. And I don't want to put myself in a position to where I risk getting hurt, because if I reach out and he doesn't respond to that or has a negative response to that, that's going to hurt me again. And if his reaching out to me was genuine and he really does want to talk, then he'll do it when he's sober. You know, I thought he'll call next week or something, or at an appropriate time, and he will have an adult conversation if that's what he truly is seeking. If not, then he was just drunk acting a fool, or he was just lonely and, quote, thinking of me. So I never responded, and that was that. That was the last contact from him. I don't know if it'll be the last, but I would be lying if I said that I don't think about him. I certainly still do. I will say I did receive some intel after the ghosting occurred from a source, which I will not name or give any details because I don't want to out my source. But I did receive intel about Ghost that revealed to me that he was certainly hiding some things about himself. He was hiding some of his flaws, and I think that to a certain extent he was sort of putting on a front or a facade about just certain aspects about his life and where he's at and who he is and what he wants. I'll leave that at that, but having that intel did help me to see that maybe this person isn't exactly who I thought he was. So when I think about him now, I hope that he is working on himself, because someone who has the ability to ghost someone or abandon someone is someone who's hurting. Hurt people. And that's someone who potentially has an avoidant attachment style. That's someone who potentially has been abandoned or betrayed in their past. That is someone who is potentially afraid of commitment or afraid of confrontation. And all of those things are symptoms of a wounded person. We're all wounded in our own ways. And this human experience, we're all finding healing. So when I think of him, I do truly hope and pray that he is finding healing and that he is working on becoming the person that I thought he was, and that he's working on becoming more courageous and less cowardly. I have done the work to look at myself throughout the relationship, and I see where I have room for improvement, as we all do, because we're not perfect. But, you know, the true colors came out, as they always do. So people say like, oh, it's better that it happens sooner than later. And I hate that saying, because I feel like it really discredits the depth of the relationship. It discredits the effect that it has on you. But on the same token, I am glad it happened sooner than later. I would have rather this happened than him abandon me after an engagement, or leave me at the altar, or abandon me and our children, you know, once we're married. So someone who has the ability to ghost or abandon like that, to me, you don't know where their limit is. You don't know what they're capable of. So although I hate that phrase, I am grateful that it happened sooner than later. So that's pretty much the story. I hope that some of you guys can relate and that it helps you to feel like you're not crazy, you're not alone, We live in a very broken world, and our dating culture right now is messed up. And that's why we're here. We're trying to fix it. We're trying to find love. We're trying to find our person. So please comment if you've been through a similar situation or if you know someone who has. There will be many, many, many more story times. And I promise they won't all be this serious. Some of them will be funny. Some of them are much worse than this. Unfortunately, I have some horrible stories, some really horrible things that I have been through that I'm willing to share all of it. Thank you all so much for tuning in to today's episode of That's What He Said. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, and I hope you're taking away something valuable that will benefit your dating life. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please give this show a follow, rate, and review. And if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe, like this video, and most importantly, comment below because I want to hear what you said. See you next time.